Chef Sean Mativich, and I've been a chef for 21 years. I teach a la carte cooking here at the Culinary Institute of Virginia. And today I want to talk to you about workplace safety. In my 21 years, I've seen a lot of accidents, and my goal is to teach you what to do when those eventual accidents occur and to minimize any of the outcomes that might arise. We, as restaurant operators and owners, have liability for the safety of our guests. In other words, that just means that we have a legal obligation to make sure that our guests are safe. We also have a legal obligation to make sure that our workers are safe and the people that work with us. And so there's a variety of standard operating procedures that we put in place to make sure that we're taking care of our guests and we're taking care of our employees. So today I'm going to talk to you about material safety data sheets. I'm going to talk to you about fires. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about spills and slips and falls. And then we'll wrap up by talking about some of the minor first aid occurrences that you can deal with yourself in the kitchen. So we'll get right into it. And I'm going to come over and talk about the material safety data sheet. All right, so our material safety data sheet, we usually keep in a notebook. And inside of here, we have all of the different sheets of all the different chemicals that we use in the kitchen. And the reason that that's important is because a lot of the accidents that do occur when we least expect them, and we really want to have all the information at hand to be able to address whatever emergency it is, whether it's a fire, whether it's a spill, whether it's gotten onto our skin or into our eyes. We really need to understand what it was that got into our eyes or on our skin, and we need to understand how to clean it up or how to provide the best first aid that we possibly can. Because when you have an accident with a chemical, sometimes seconds and minutes really are critical to reducing a very serious injury. And so having this somewhere where everybody knows where it's at is going to be very critical to your safety plan in your workplace. Over here, I wanted to just talk about a couple of things. Number one is, along with the MSDS sheet, we have a specific place in our kitchen where we want to put our chemicals. The chemicals shouldn't be stored near food. They should be stored completely separate. And the best idea is to have a completely separate closet. But if your kitchen doesn't have space for that, at least its very own area in the kitchen where chemicals are stored. And they all need to be labeled very well and very clearly, because a lot of different dry chemicals especially look just like food. Lye that we use for making pretzels or cleaning drains, that can look exactly like kosher salt, and so you wouldn't want to accidentally mix those two things up. That could be a very bad day for us. And so it's really important to always label everything in the kitchen, but particularly the chemicals, and to keep them away from the food so that there's not ever any confusion. Because under normal circumstances, the chemicals that we use do their intended job, they do it well, and you really don't have anything to worry about as long as you're using them safely. It's those times when we accidentally mix them up, or we mix them together when we're not supposed to, or when they accidentally contaminate our food, that they become dangerous. So you don't have to worry about using them properly, but you do have to worry about storing them properly so that people don't get mixed up. In addition to that, one of the other major things that we worry about in the kitchen is fires. We cook with fire every day. We use gas, flames, we use the ovens, we use blowtorches. But one of the things that is always present in our minds is that we could have a situation where something in the kitchen catches on fire and is not controlled. And in that situation, we'll want to really know how to put it out. So there's really three different types of fires that we deal with in a kitchen. There's Class A fires, which are anything that creates an ash. That's going to be paper, cardboard, linens, wood, those types of things that would create an ash during the process. And those can really be put out with water or any of your wet or dry chemical fire extinguishers. Class B fires are liquid, flammable liquids. And that can be gasoline, diesel, but more frequently it's the grease from the deep fat fryer, or maybe some stovetop frying. It could be butter. It could be grease from ribs or French fries or anything that you're cooking on the stove. And we wouldn't want to use water to put that out. So there's quite a few things in the kitchen that we've set up for safety to make sure that if we have a grease fire, that we can extinguish it properly, because if we use water, it's going to get much bigger. The sprinkler system in pretty much all commercial kitchens, sometimes we call it the Ansel system, is designed to put those grease fires out with a chemical that will blanket the entire kitchen. Now, there's a couple of different ways that they can go off. You can do it manually, and there's usually a pull that you'll find on the way out the door. There's also a link that's inside of the hood up here, and at 350 degrees, when that up there on top reaches 350 degrees, it'll just break, and it will automatically release the chemical agent. So it's a highly reliable system because there's some redundancy inside of there. Now, if that doesn't work, we also have other options, okay? And so I want to show you a fire extinguisher. And every kitchen should have a fire extinguisher, and you should know exactly where it's at. Because if this situation arises where the fryer catches, or something happens on the stovetop where you spill some butter and it starts to light up, you really want to have something at your disposal to be able to put that out in a safe way. And again, if you use water, it's only going to make the situation worse. And so we'll want to use a fire extinguisher that's designed for kitchen fires. And you'll see it on the label. It will be clearly labeled as to what type of fire extinguisher it is. The type that you have in your home, the little red fire extinguishers, they're not typically appropriate for fires that would arise in a commercial kitchen. So it's really important to purchase the right kind of fire extinguisher, and it's really important that everybody knows where it's at, because again, the more prepared you are, when you're in the situation where there's a fire, seconds really count. And if you can't find the fire extinguisher, that fire is burning the entire time that you're looking for it. So install the proper fire extinguisher, make sure everybody knows exactly where it's at. So one of the things that we deal with a lot, one of the most common injuries that we deal with in kitchens, is slips and falls. So one of the things that you want to make sure of when you're dealing with water or anything that spills, you spill it on the ground, make sure that you put a wet floor sign down right away. You're going to have to go get the mop, and while you're gone getting the mop, somebody could come over and they could slip and fall. So it's really important that we communicate with this bright sign, hey guys, there's water on the floor, don't step over here, okay? And that usually is enough so that people will say, all right, I need to stay out of this area, I need to watch what I'm doing, because most of the time people are acting through habit, and when you're walking around the kitchen, you're not expecting for there to be water on the floor and slip and fall. And so this kind of makes people pay attention that there's a different situation in the kitchen, and they will pay more attention. Okay, so a couple of things that we do: make sure to clean up any water spills right away, or any food spills right away, because they can be very slippery. And make sure that you throw out a wet floor sign anytime that you've got to go get something and come back to address it. And right now, I'm going to go over and talk about the first aid kit and show you how to address some of the minor cuts, burns, and sprains that arise in the kitchen that you can deal with yourself as a first aid responder. All right, so now we're talking about first aid and some of the injuries that can happen in the kitchen. Most of the injuries that happen in the kitchen are not going to be life-threatening, and they're going to be very minor. Okay, so you'll be able to take care of it with the stuff in the first aid kit, and you'll be able to go home at the end of the day. And if there's ever situation where somebody stops breathing, where they're bleeding profusely and you can't get it to stop, or if they're having an allergic reaction, you should call 911 right away. But for most of the things, we can take care of it ourselves. So with the stuff that's inside of the first aid kit, we can address minor burns, we can address chemical burns, we can address cuts, scrapes, and sprains. Okay, so if you were to get burned in the kitchen, the very first thing that you should do is to run cold running water over it, and that's going to help to stop whatever's burning from burning you, and it's going to help soothe the pain a little bit. Okay, the fact that it hurts is actually a good sign, and it means that you're not burned too badly, because when you do typically get a worse burn, then it actually burns away the nerves that make you feel pain. So Pain is actually a good sign when you're burned, and so if you can just run that under cold running water for about 20 minutes, that'll tend to help out. If there's any blisters, you're going to want to cover that burn with a clean dressing, and there's plenty of those inside of your first aid kit. So a sterile dressing is going to keep the bacteria out, because if it's broken the skin, you're not going to want to get any kind of infection. Chemical burns, we're going to do the same thing. We want to make sure to flush that for at least 20 minutes to make sure that any of that chemical that's gotten on your skin is completely gone. Because if you don't get rid of it, it's going to continue to burn your skin. After that, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to apply a clean, sterile dressing, and that is going to prevent any more bacteria from getting in, and it'll keep the wound nice and clean. You're going to want to make sure to keep that really nice and loose, though, because you don't want it to be irritating and pulling off any of the skin that was damaged. Okay? As far as cuts and scrapes, the very first thing that you want to do is you want to get pressure on that right away. Okay? We want to stop any kind of bleeding that's happening. So if you cut yourself during your knife skills with your cutting board, or if you were to fall and maybe catch the underside of a counter, any type of bleeding, we want to stop the bleeding right away. Okay? So put pressure on it until it stops, and then you want to clean it really well. So we'll take it over to the sink, wash really well, ensure that cut is very, very nice and clean, and then we can apply some ointment to it, okay, to make sure that there's no bacteria again. So we have antibiotic ointment in our first aid kit, and then we're going to cover it with a bandage, and that bandage is going to keep the bacteria out. So it's really important to keep that wound clean, and then you can go for, if you need to go to the doctor later, if it's not healing right, then you're not getting any kind of infection in the meantime. The other things that happen frequently in the kitchen, again, it goes along with slips and falls. We might need to apply a compression bandage if, say, we got a sprain or something like that. Okay, so if we twisted our ankle or something, the best thing that you can do is to get your weight off of it, ice it down, put on a compression bandage, and then kind of see how it's progressing. If there's any kind of swelling or anything like that, you might add some ice to it. But then you can go get further checked out by a doctor. But certainly when it happens, we have the things at our disposal to be able to address those common injuries. So make sure to keep your first aid kit well stocked. Make sure that you keep all of the items that are inside, particularly the medications, up to date, and make sure that they're not expired from time to time. And this can be a really good tool for when an accident does happen, so that you can address it right away and it doesn't wind up getting worse. At the end of the day, accidents are going to happen. They're going to happen when you least expect them. And the best thing that you can do for your team and for your guests is to put a plan in place to make sure that when the accident does happen, you're prepared to deal with it. Because those seconds and those minutes, they do count when an accident happens, and how you respond is going to affect the outcome for that individual who it's happened to. So when it comes to chemicals, when it comes to slips and falls, and when it comes to first aid, I hope that you're able to learn a little bit that you didn't know before. And thanks for joining me on this workplace safety tour.